Welcome to another episode of Globetrotting 5, your capsule of the top international news. I'm Rudranil Ghosh, and in this episode, we are going to discuss the increasing US military pressure on Venezuela. Many of you would know that the US has been ramping up military pressure on Venezuela for the last few months. This, the US says, is because of the drug trafficking that comes out of Venezuela. Specifically, the US has been targeting so-called drug boats that are apparently heading from Venezuela to the United States. Of course, drug trafficking is a serious issue in the United States, and President Donald Trump has said that he is going to take action. In that sense, the US targeting of these so-called drug boats coming out of Venezuela can be construed as the US defending itself from drug trafficking and drug crime. However, it is the US tactics that are under question here, because the US has been amassing military assets in the region, in the Caribbean, specifically in the US territory of Puerto Rico, to carry out these so-called anti-drug operations. In fact, the US military has carried out several strikes against these so-called drug boats coming out of Venezuela. In these strikes, more than 80 people have already been killed. The most serious incident has been that of a double strike that the US military reportedly carried out against one particular alleged drug boat, in which the first strike did not kill all the passengers in this boat, and a second strike was carried out to eliminate any survivors who were left behind. This has created a huge stir in Washington and has demanded investigation and oversight from the US Congress. Meanwhile, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has vehemently opposed the US categorization of these operations. He says that US is behaving like an imperialist nation and is unfairly targeting his country. As a matter of fact, Trump has been directly ramping up pressure on Maduro. He has suggested that Maduro should leave Venezuela and vacate his position as president. This has led to concerns that the real US intention is not to tackle drug trafficking coming out of Venezuela, but to effect a regime change in Venezuela. If that happens, we may be looking at a repeat of what happened in Iraq in the early 2000s. However, there is a counterpoint to this argument. For President Trump had come to power on the promise of ending US foreign intervention, particularly ending US involvement in foreign wars. That is what he promised his MAGA base. So for him to now start another war, and that too in the Western Hemisphere, so close to the United States, would be politically suicidal. So it is quite possible that all this US posturing, military posturing, is not intended to actually carry out a US military intervention in Venezuela. So what is the US really after here? Well, I have a slightly different theory. I think that the US is putting pressure on Maduro to make a deal. Well, this is something that Trump likes doing. He likes making deals to America's advantage. And why now? And why Venezuela? Well, remember that Venezuela and Maduro are allies of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And Putin currently is in tough negotiations for a peace deal on the Ukraine war. So I don't think that what is happening in Venezuela and in Russia are unrelated. I think that Trump sees an opportunity here, as Putin is stuck in the Ukraine war, and obviously he has spent a lot of military and political and economic capital on that war. He is not able to service his other strategic relationships, like those with Venezuela. So I think Trump is trying to put pressure on Maduro to wean him away, to wean Venezuela away from Russia's strategic ambit. This is something that we have already seen in West Asia. We saw the fall of Assad, and we have seen the new Syrian regime open up to the West. So, this is something of a strategic game that the US is playing to put pressure on Maduro and Venezuela and wean it away from Russia's strategic ambit. And Russia, since it is stuck in Ukraine, stuck in the negotiations to end that war, it is not able to aid Maduro at the moment. It just doesn't have the strategic capability to handle multiple issues or multiple strategic battles at the same time. Hence, I think that the US is playing a very clever strategic game here. I don't think military intervention is going to happen. I think US wants to wean Venezuela away from the Russian strategic ambit and force Maduro to cut a deal. With that, I would like to end this episode. See you next time. Thank you.